Genesis 28. We're really at verse number 10. I'm going to back us up just a little because once we have slept, I have slept, I kind of forget where I am and who I was talking about in this story. If you back up to verse 6, Jacob is going away. Jacob is going to find a wife from his wife's people. In other words, God-fearing people. And so in verse 6, Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away. He's going to go to the land of Haran and find that wife. It's going to be Rebekah. That's who God has chosen. Remember that all the promises of God to Jacob is in through his line. It was Abraham and Isaac, and now it's Jacob. And it is not Esau. Esau was not chosen, just like Ishmael wasn't chosen. And so now Esau sees that Isaac has blessed Jacob and sent him away. And if you look at that, you see the mind of Esau going through his mind. What am I going to do to gain approval of my mother and father, which is Jacob and Rebekah? And so remember that these two boys, they have chosen sides, the mother and father. Isaac's favorite is who? Esau. Who is Rebekah's favorite? Did I get it right? Is it Rebekah? Jacob and Rebekah. I get them mixed up sometimes. That's it, isn't it? And Rebekah, who's her favorite? Jacob. And so they see this going on, the sons, the boys, and so Esau's already sold his blessing and his inheritance for a bowl of red stew. And so when you see this, Isaac's words, you shall not take a wife of your daughters of Canaan. These are the words that Isaac spoke to Jacob. And so Esau knows this. He's listening. Now, the problem is Esau has already married two Canaanite women. And God's command was not to do that. Why does God not want him to do that? They worship idols, don't they? And almost in every case, it's the believer in God Almighty that drifts away. I don't know what he does, what a person does, even today. I don't know what causes them to do this. I'm telling you the truth. It may not start that way, but the more they live with that person, if they can't convert them, then the more they live with that person, they become unfaithful themselves. And they just like they're satisfied with what's going on. I know. So Esau, he hears that statement, and he's married two of them. And so both Jacob and Esau understand what's happening. They understand what's going on. Esau sees his parents sending Jacob off to find a wife of Rebekah's family. And so a wife who trusts and obeys God. And so look what happens in verse 8. So Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan displeased his father Isaac. Esau seems to be willing to open his eyes and understand that his marriage to two heathen women will change probably his course of life. In fact, it did. And so now he's trying to please Isaac and Rebekah all of a sudden. Esau's driven by physical things instead of spiritual things. So what does he do? He goes to his uncle, Ishmael. And Ishmael, what is wrong with that? With that thinking? I'm going to get me a wife from Ishmael. But the problem is, Ishmael was not the chosen one, was he? Isaac was. And so Ishmael was not chosen by God, who is a son of Abraham and Hagar. And so Esau marries another wife. In verse 9, that's who he marries. It's Mahalalel, the daughter of Ishmael. And this was a desperate attempt by Esau to gain favor from his parents and God. and he doesn't know exactly why and what he's thinking. But it does seem like he thinks that everything's going to be okay now. Everything's going to be just fine. And it's not. And what is amazing to me is with this marriage, Esau's new wife stands in the same degree of relationship to Isaac and his father, but it was Ishmael that's not chosen by God. Rachel is a wife of Jacob, wife of Jacob, and her relationship that she has to Rebekah. Esau marries, in other words, the bottom line, Esau marries his father's niece, which is not in the line, and Jacob marries his mother's niece, which is in the line. Does that make sense? So Esau's now, it's too late to regain what he lost, but to God, he never had it. He never had it. He could still worship God, he could still serve God, but he doesn't. And he's desperate to gain the favor of his parents, and he's still wrong in the eyes of God. And so Esau was not the chosen one. And so let's go to verse number 10 where we left off. Verse number 10 of Genesis chapter 28. Let's read 10 through 15. Then Jacob departed from Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and he spent the night there because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream, and behold, a ladder was set on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Verse 13, and behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land which you lie I will give to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out from west to the east and the north and the south. And in you all the descendants, and in you and in your descendants, I'll read it right in a minute, shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Wow. Wouldn't you like for God to say that to you? Wait a minute. He did, didn't he? He did say that to us. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. He'll be with us wherever we are. He's always with us. One of these days I'm going to get a BB gun and shoot that dog out there in the leg. So in verse 10, Jacob departed from Beersheba. He went toward Haran. So Jacob leaves home to go find a wife, traveling toward Haran where Rebekah's family is. In verse 11, he came to this certain place. He's going to spend the night. So Jacob is spending the night out in the open. Listen, he don't have nothing with him. You remember when Isaac went? When Abraham sent Isaac's servant to find a wife. He had camels, he had jewels, he had all this stuff to go find a wife for Isaac. Not here. He doesn't have anything. What's he using for a pillow? A rock. And so, look, here he is, and Ishmael is not the son of promise. Keep that in mind. Then Jacob departed, and Jacob is going to find a wife, and he came to this certain place. He's spending the night out in the open. His travel was hard. He didn't have anything to support himself. He had a rock for a pillow, and he had to settle in before sundown, but it already got dark. Verse 12, he had a dream. Man, we can picture this in our mind. A ladder set from the earth to the top where heaven is. The angels of God were ascending and descending on it. You can see that, can't you? One of the most beautiful scenes in God's holy word. A ladder coming from heaven and reaching earth. And the angels of God going up and down on it. Hebrew word for ladder can also indicate a ramp or a staircase. But we got ladder. Some of our versions have ladder. And so, this is the first time God appears to Jacob. But it's not going to be the last time, because he appears to him a total of 7 times that I counted. You might find me wrong. God will always appear to Jacob in a sleep, in a dream. What's amazing about, I hate to stop, but what's amazing about Moses is God spoke to him mouth to mouth, face to face. But here, he speaks to him in a dream. And he will appear to Jacob at least 7 times in his life. It's intended to teach him and you and I today the providence of God. Everything works out, doesn't it? No matter how bad we think it is, no matter how bad we see the world, no matter how bad if that woman becomes president, none of that matters. No matter all the trials and temptations and all the things we go through in this life, Paul says what? In Romans 8 and verse 28. All things work together for good to them who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And how does he call us? How does he call us? By the gospel. Yeah, by the gospel. So, he is showing Jacob that he's going to be with him, and God is ready to use Jacob to accomplish his will. When I think of that, Jesus talking to Nathaniel, you remember when Nathaniel was called and he was under, I forget what he was under. Anyway, and Jesus knew where he was. He said, I knew where you were. You were under the fig tree, I think it was. And so in John chapter 1 and verse 51, here's what Jesus tells Nathanael. Hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man, who is Jesus Christ our Savior. Isn't that amazing? It is amazing. So this dream from God to Jacob should make us realize that we're not isolated on this earth. We are his children. God is always near us. There's countless angels that are busy as his divine servants doing the will of God. Hebrews 1 and verse 14 tells us, are they not all ministering spirits sent out to render service for the sake of those who inherit salvation? So verse 13. Genesis 28, verse 13. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the land in which you lie, and I will give it to you and to your descendants. So he reminds Jacob that he is the God of Abraham and Isaac, and tells him in the land that you're sleeping on that rock right now, or you have slept, that land is going to be yours, and you may not have it, but your descendants will. So here he is in the land of promise that he's making to Jacob, and you can imagine this event. I mean, the Lord is speaking at him from atop of a ladder in heaven. God intended Jacob to be the spiritual leader, and Jacob never actually owned any land. But his descendants do, and he's in the land of Canaan, where who is going to bring all the children of Israel back to? Moses is going to bring them all back, isn't he? Going to have to go through 10 plagues, and going to have to part the Red Sea. Going to have to do all of that and wander in the wilderness for 40 years. What's amazing is he took them all the way to the borderland. I mean, that was no time at all. They could just go in. And he sent out the 12 spies, and what did they say? 10 of them, anyway. Oh, we can't do it. Oh, we're like grasshoppers in their sight. And Joshua and Caleb said, oh no, God will be with us. But they got voted down, and so the punishment was 40 years wandering in the wilderness until that generation died, except for Joshua and Caleb. So he's reminding Jacob that he is the God of Abraham and Isaac, and he tells him the land where you are right now will be you and your descendants, the land of promise. Can you imagine seeing this event and the Lord speaking to him? He's intended to be the spiritual leader, and like Abraham and Isaac, but the descendants are the ones that's going to have that land. So Jacob doesn't know it yet. He would not see the land for 20 years. After he leaves, he won't be back to that land where he put that rock and slept on that rock as a pillow. He won't be back there for 20 years. And Rebekah thinks you're going to go away from Isaac, from Esau, thank you. You're going to go away from Esau just long enough for him to cool down and calm down. But she don't know it's going to be 20 years. So his concern was to find a wife so he could fulfill these promises that God gave him. And the whole process that we study, that's how long it will be before he returns. Man, that's faith, isn't it? We want things right now, don't we? We want blessings right now. We don't want to wait. But everything's on God's time, isn't it? In verse 14, and in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. God tells him his descendants will be like the dust of the earth. Abraham and Isaac had a similar promise, and this promise is now being passed to Jacob. All of Jacob's descendants will spread out in every direction over the earth. Through all the families of the earth will be blessed. The coming of Jesus Christ into the world. How many sons, and that's why when we get there, I want you to notice this. How many sons does Jacob have? 12. 12. In a minute you're going to see, well, you might not be in a minute, we might not get that far. I always wondered who was the oldest of the sons. I don't know why, I forget or I don't remember. And if you look at Genesis 29 verse 32, you'll find out. Genesis 29:32, who is the oldest of the 12 sons? Reuben. Reuben. When Joseph got put in a pit by his brothers, who was it that wanted to go back and get him out of the pit and take him back to his father? Reuben. It's just a little advance there. I didn't mean to get ahead in history. So through him, Jesus Christ, through this family line, Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, comes into the world. In verse 15, God tells him, behold, I'm with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and I'll bring you back to the land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. What wonderful words of promise. Jacob knows that he will not leave him. He'll bring him back to the land of promise. God will not leave us. We are his people. We are a spiritual Israel. We belong to him. And so as Christians, we have this same promise. God is always with us. He'll lead us if we'll allow him to. We inherit the land of promise. Where is it? It's up above in heaven. Jacob had these assurances from God, and we all want to feel safe, and we all want a place of security where we can work and live and spend our lives, and Jacob's life will be secure in all that he does. Jacob is faithful to God, and God is faithful to him. How does that pertain to us? We are to be faithful to God. And God is going to be faithful to us. That faithfulness covers a large area. And I'm not going to get into what I was going to get into. I'll just go on. I'll be positive. Let's look at verse 16 and 17. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place?" Verse 17. "There is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." I'm going to stop there for just a second before we go on to 18. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. He understands this, doesn't he? He's had a great impact from this. That the dream that God gave him, we can only imagine how he feels. How he sees this in his mind. We would be the same way. It wouldn't be a dime's worth of difference if that was us. And look at the past events in Jacob's life. He was chosen by God instead of his brother Esau. Favoritism of Rebekah. Esau now wants to kill him because he sold his birthright and got the blessing, and he did all that with a bowl of stew, because it didn't mean anything to him until it's too late. And so he leaves home with what's on his back. He finds a wife later. He lays down at night for a rock for a pillow, and he has this dream. God speaks to him in the night, gives him the promises and the blessings of what he's going to give him, the land, and all his descendants are going to be blessed. The promises will be with him wherever he goes. He wakes up, he understands what happened. He knows that God is in his life. In verse 17, he was afraid, and he said, "How awesome is this place?" He knows it, doesn't he? And that's what we would say. How awesome in this place. There's none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And he understands he has to be faithful to God. He understands the plan of God is beginning to unfold right before his very eyes. From the beginning, we see the providence of Almighty God. Is God's providence with us today? Is it? Yeah, it is. But sometimes we go along with a sour face on, and we're grouchy, and we think nothing's ever going to happen any good, and we don't see how anything possibly good could come from what has happened to us. But it will, because God works it out. We are his children, and we may die. So what? So what? That takes faith, doesn't it? That takes faith in God. The providence of God in the lives of men. He always accomplishes his will. We are his instruments. We too struggle in this life with a lot of things we struggle with. And sometimes we just don't understand. But the secret is to have faith and to obey him in our lives. We have struggles in our lives as Christians, and so we have to stop all of a sudden. I don't know if I ought to. It's not about me, but I've been working on this lesson. I preached a lot for years on Sodom and Gomorrah, but I'm working on this lesson that's a little different twist that Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Isaiah used the sins of Sodom to equate that to what the children of Israel was doing, what they had turned their back on God. And then I look at Romans chapter, I'm going to use Romans chapter 1, verses 21 through 28, because it shows the steps in our fall from God, the things we go through that causes us to fall from God. And I'm going to try to relate that with what they say about Sodom. Anyway, so we all have struggles in our lives, and we have to realize that God is with us. He's in our lives each day. and what the benefit is of prayer. And he gives us peace, and he gives us love. Prayer is so important and so neglected by many of us. Now let's look at 18 through 22. Yes.
About verse 17.
Uh-huh.
It says, "This is none other than the house of God." He was out in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere.
And he said, "This is the house of God." That tells me that you don't have to have a building. This is not the house of God.
That's right.
This is the house
Yeah,
of God.
we are, aren't we?
And the other thing is the gate of heaven.
Yeah.
Anytime we have God's word and
Yeah.
God, we are at the gate of heaven.
Yes, ma'am. Great points. Thank you very much. Thank you for saying that. Verse 18 through 22. So Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on its top. And he called the name of the place Bethel. However, previously the name of the city had been Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone which I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you." Do you know he never quit that? He gave that tenth every time. He don't have nothing now. He ain't got a dime on him. Nothing. And he's making God this promise. So Jacob rose early in the morning. He took that stone he's going to use that he had used for a pillow, and he made a pillar, and he poured oil on top, and the name of the place he renames it Bethel. And what do you think Bethel means? House of God. House of God. Bethel became a well-known city, a holy place in central Palestine. Palestine's in Texas, isn't it? It's when the children of Israel returned from Egypt. Where do you think they go? Right here. Bethel has become a place later for the Canaanites. It is the Canaanites right now. It's one of the first cities that's conquered by the Israelites. First city. You find this in Judges chapter 1, verse 22 through 26, if you're interested. Abraham built an altar when he got there at Bethel. You could follow Abraham's path. When he was called, he was 75 years old. He left everything he had, and he went on a journey, and God telling him where he's going to go, and he don't have a clue. But you can follow his route if you could find the altars that he built. Everywhere he went, he built an altar, and Bethel was one of those. Isn't that amazing? Boy, God is amazing. And so in verse 20, then Jacob made a vow. He made a vow to our God. If God will be with me. He just told him that he would be with him. Well, we're crazy people, aren't we? We're silly. Jacob is silly, and there's not a dime's worth of difference from us today. We're the same people. God had just told him, I'm going to be with you. He's going to keep you on this journey. We're going to find a wife. We're going to give you food and clothing. And he knows he needs God more than ever now. Verse 21, I will return to my father's house to safety, and the Lord will be my God. It's hard for us to read this and wonder why, after God gave him this wondrous dream and these promises, that he's worried about this. Sometimes I don't understand myself. I don't understand, because I know the promises of God he has for me as his child. I know that. But sometimes I get a little weak in the faith. Do you? Or no, it's just me, huh? That's what I thought. We have the whole picture, yeah. He didn't, did he? He did not. So it took a lot more faith for him. So here's Jacob that's basically saying to God, if you will fulfill your promises to me, here's what I will do for you. Isn't that what he's saying? Jacob is in the process of building his faith, just like Darwin said. He can't see the whole picture. We can. But he's in the process of building his faith. And it'll take him years to do so. It'll take him 20 years to do so. In fact, listen, when we become a child of God, do we know everything at once? No. We grow. We develop. We first start on milk, and then we grow. Jacob is in the process of building his faith, and it's going to take him years. Then in verse 22, this stone which I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. In return, he's going to set up an altar at Bethel, and he's going to give God a tenth of everything that his has. It's so important for us to never forget all of these promises we have. But in verse 20, when Jacob uses a word that we use every day, what is the word that Jacob's using that we use sometime every day? If. That's a little word, isn't it? But boy, it got a lot of power to it. If you'll be with me. Now, some versions of the Bible translate it since you'll be with me. You can take the one you want. I'm going to say if, because I'm struck with if a lot. So he says to God, either since you will be with me, or if you will be with me. Maybe since has more meaning in this verse, because he knows God's promises that he just made to him. And so he's vowing to follow God. So maybe I'm wrong if I say that if. So it's also important to us to never forget that Jacob never forgot his promises to God. He lived in the midst of idolatry. Everywhere around him, he always worshiped the one true and living God. And when he made this promise of a tenth, he had little of the world's goods. He didn't have hardly anything. And he's promising God to give him a tenth. He'll give a tenth of the world's goods. He winds up wealthy later, and he still kept that promise. Everybody with me? Huh? Is it important that we give to God? It is. It's vital. We give of our time. We give of our talent. And what else? We give of our money. That's what God expects. He loves a cheerful giver. You don't have to give a tenth, but you give what your heart says. Any questions or comments before I quit? It's time to quit. We'll be at chapter 29 next time.